I woke up to someone pounding on my door like they were trying to break it down, which seemed about right for a Tuesday morning in the Meadowbrook Gardens community of Scottsdale, Arizona. My oxygen concentrator hummed steadily in the corner of my bedroom, the sound so familiar I barely noticed it anymore. That machine had been my constant companion for the last 3 years, since my chronic obstructive pulmonary disease diagnosis. I glanced at the clock. 7:30 in the morning. Way too early for this nonsense. The pounding continued. I grabbed my portable oxygen tank, the smaller one I used when moving around the house, and made my way to the front door. Through the peephole, I could see Patricia Thornberry, president of our homeowners association, standing there with her arms crossed. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful, and she wore one of those power blazers that screamed middle management trying too hard. I opened the door. "Morning, Patricia. What can I do for you?" "Oliver Zander, we need to talk about that propane heater you have in your backyard." She didn't wait for an invitation, just pushed past me into my living room. "The propane heater. What about it?" Patricia pulled out her phone and started scrolling through what I assumed were HOA regulations. According to Section 12, Subsection 4 of our community guidelines, all heating devices visible from common areas must be approved by the board. You never submitted a request for approval. "That's my backup generator heater. It runs on propane. I need it." "Need it? Oliver, it's Arizona. We don't get cold enough here to need outdoor heaters. Besides, the spring community picnic is coming up in 2 weeks, and several residents have complained about not having adequate heating for evening events. Since you clearly don't need it, we've decided to requisition it for community use." I stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said. "You want to take my propane heater? It's not about want. It's about what's best for the community. The HOA has the authority to manage common resources, and since you've violated the rules by not getting approval, we're exercising our right to confiscate it and repurpose it for the benefit of all residents." "Patricia, you can't just take my property." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Actually, according to the covenant you signed when you purchased your home here, the HOA has broad authority to enforce compliance with community standards. That includes removing items that violate our regulations. 2 maintenance workers are outside right now, and they'll be taking the heater within the hour." "Wait, you need to understand something. That's not just a heater. It's part of my backup power system for my medical equipment." Patricia waved her hand dismissively. "You have electricity, Oliver. I can see your lights are on." "Yes, but if the power goes out, that propane system powers a generator that keeps my oxygen concentrator running. Without it, I could die." "Don't be dramatic. Power outages here rarely last more than a few hours, and I'm sure you have battery backups or something. Besides, if it's really that important, you should have submitted the proper paperwork. Maybe this will teach you to follow the rules." She turned and walked out before I could respond, leaving me standing there with my mouth open. I heard voices outside and went to my back patio door. Sure enough, 2 guys in Meadowbrook Gardens maintenance uniforms were already disconnecting my propane setup. The heater itself was connected to a large propane tank, which fed into a generator system my doctor had helped me install after a power outage 2 years ago had nearly put me in the hospital. I rushed outside, moving as fast as I could with my portable oxygen tank in tow. "Hey, stop. You can't take that." One of the workers, a younger guy with a sunburn, looked uncomfortable. "Sorry, man. We're just following orders from the HOA. That's medical equipment. It's part of my backup power system." The other worker, older with gray stubble, shrugged. "Take it up with the board. We just do what they tell us." I watched helplessly as they loaded everything onto a truck. The propane tank, the heater, the connecting lines, all of it. $3,000 worth of equipment that could mean the difference between life and death if we had another power outage during one of Arizona's intense summer storms. After they left, I immediately called my doctor, Dr. Sarah Mitchell. She'd been treating my cop since the diagnosis and understood better than anyone how serious my condition was. "Oliver, they can't do that," she said after I explained the situation. "That backup system is medically necessary. I'll write a letter right now." "I don't think Patricia cares about letters." "Then we'll make her care. I'm also going to contact the state health department. What they've done could constitute medical negligence if something happens to you." Next, I called my lawyer, Michael Chen. I'd used him for the home purchase and figured he'd know about HOA law. "Oliver, this is definitely actionable," Michael said. "They can't confiscate property that's medically necessary, regardless of what their covenants say. Those covenants don't supersede federal and state laws regarding medical equipment and reasonable accommodations for disabilities. I'll draft a demand letter today." "How long will that take?" "I can have it to them by end of business today. But Oliver, you need to document everything. Take photos of where the equipment was. Get copies of your medical records showing why you need it. Keep records of all communications with the HOA." I spent the rest of the morning doing exactly that. I photographed the empty space where my backup system had been, the disconnected wiring, everything. I called my insurance company to see if this was covered. They weren't sure and said they'd have to research it. That afternoon, I decided to attend the HOA board meeting. They met every week in the community center, a fancy building with a pool and gym that we all paid for through our monthly dues. When I arrived, Patricia was already there with the other board members. There was Sandra Whitmore, the treasurer, a thin woman in her 50s who always looked like she'd sucked on a lemon. Gregory Hughes, the secretary, was a retired accountant who seemed to just go along with whatever Patricia wanted. And Denise Carlton, the newest board member, who actually seemed reasonable most of the time. "Oliver, this isn't an open forum," Patricia said when she saw me. "Residents need to submit requests to speak in advance. You took my medical equipment this morning. I think that warrants an emergency discussion." Several other residents in the room turned to look. There were maybe 15 people there, mostly retirees who had nothing better to do than watch HOA drama unfold. Patricia's face tightened. "We removed an unapproved heating device that violated community standards." "It's not a heating device. It's a backup power system for my oxygen concentrator. I have copped. Without that equipment, if the power goes out, I could die." Denise leaned forward. "Patricia, is this true? Is his equipment medically necessary?" "He never submitted the proper documentation." "Because I didn't think I needed to," I said. "It's in my backyard. It's not visible from the street, and it's keeping me alive." Gregory adjusted his glasses. "The covenants are clear about requiring board approval for any external structures or equipment. This isn't a decoration. This is medical equipment. Federal law requires you to make reasonable accommodations for disabilities." Sandra pulled out a folder. "We have no record of you ever declaring a disability to the board." "I didn't know I had to declare that I have a chronic illness to the HOA. That seems like a pretty serious privacy violation." Patricia stood up. "Oliver, you're disrupting our meeting. If you have concerns, submit them in writing through the proper channels. Your equipment is currently being stored in our maintenance facility and will be used for the community picnic as planned. If you want it back after that, you can submit a formal request with the appropriate medical documentation, and we'll consider it. The picnic is in 2 weeks. What if we have a power outage before then? Then I suggest you make other arrangements. Now, I'm going to have to ask you to leave so we can continue with our agenda." I looked around the room. Some residents looked uncomfortable, but nobody spoke up. I left, my hands shaking with anger and fear. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made me worry about the power going out. I checked my oxygen concentrator every hour, making sure it was running properly. The batteries in my portable tanks would last maybe 6 hours total if I was careful. After that, I'd need to get to a hospital. The next morning, I got a call from Michael Chen. "I sent the demand letter yesterday evening by email and certified mail," he said. "I outlined the legal issues and demanded they return your equipment within 48 hours. What if they don't? Then we file an emergency injunction. But that takes time and money. The filing fees alone are several $100s, and we'd need to schedule a hearing. I'm hoping they'll see reason before it comes to that." They didn't see reason. Patricia responded to the demand letter with her own letter, written by the HOA's lawyer, claiming that the equipment removal was within their authority under the covenants, and that I'd had ample opportunity to comply with community standards, but had chosen not to. She also claimed that I was exaggerating the medical necessity, and that my alleged condition didn't require such extreme measures. That phrase made my blood boil. Alleged condition. Like I was making up the fact that I couldn't breathe properly without assistance. Doctor. Mitchell was equally furious when I told her. "I'm submitting a formal complaint to the Arizona Department of Health Services. What they're doing is unconscionable." Over the next few days, I tried everything I could think of. I posted about the situation on the community Facebook group, but Patricia had me removed from the group for spreading misinformation. I contacted local news stations, but none of them seemed interested in a story about HOA drama. I even tried talking to other residents, hoping to build support, but most people just didn't want to get involved. "I'm sorry," Oliver, my neighbor, an older woman named Ellen, told me, "but Patricia can make life really difficult if you cross her." Last year, she fined the Hendersons $500 because their grass was a 1/4 inch too long. I can't afford to be on her bad side. A week after they'd taken my equipment, we had a monsoon warning. Arizona monsoon season could bring intense storms with high winds, lightning, and yes, power outages. I spent the day checking and rechecking my portable oxygen supplies, making sure my phone was charged in case I needed to call 911, and basically preparing for the worst. The storm hit around 8 in the evening. Lightning flashed across the sky and thunder shook the windows. Rain pounded against the roof. And then, at 8:45, the power went out. My oxygen concentrator died immediately. The house went dark and silent except for the storm outside. I switched to my portable tank, my hands shaking as I made the connection. I called the power company. The automated message said they were aware of the outage and estimated restoration in 4 to 6 hours. 6 hours. I had maybe 5 hours of oxygen in my portable tanks if I was careful about my breathing and activity. I called 911. "This isn't exactly an emergency," the dispatcher said after I explained the situation. "You still have oxygen available. For now. But if the power isn't back in 5 hours, I won't." "I understand, sir, but we can't send an ambulance for a situation that might become an emergency. If you start having trouble breathing, call us back." I sat in the dark, listening to the storm and watching the gauge on my oxygen tank slowly drop. I tried calling Patricia. No answer. I called the HOA emergency number. It went to voicemail. At hour 3, I started feeling lightheaded. My breathing became more labored. I was trying to stay calm, but panic was setting in. I called Michael Chen, even though it was nearly midnight. "Oliver, go to the hospital," he said immediately. "I can't drive like this. I can barely walk from room to room." "Then call 911 and tell them you're having a medical emergency, because you are." I called 911 again. This time, when I started speaking, I was genuinely struggling to breathe. "I need help. Can't breathe. Oxygen running out." An ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. The paramedics got me stabilized with their oxygen and transported me to Scottsdale Shea Medical Center. I spent the night in the emergency room, hooked up to their oxygen supply, while doctors monitored my condition. Dr. Mitchell came to see me the next morning. "Oliver, this is exactly what we were worried about. You can't go home until we know you have a reliable backup power system. The HOA has it. Then they're going to return it, or you're going to sue them into oblivion. I'm documenting all of this. Last night could have killed you." The hospital bill was going to be astronomical. Even with insurance, I was looking at thousands of dollars out of pocket. All because Patricia Thornberry wanted a heater for a picnic. Michael Chen filed the emergency injunction that morning. He also added a personal injury claim for the hospital costs and emotional distress. The hearing was scheduled for 3 days later. When I was discharged from the hospital that afternoon, the power was back on at my house, but I still didn't have my backup system. Dr. Mitchell arranged for me to rent a backup oxygen system temporarily, but it cost $200 a day. Money I didn't have. The day of the hearing arrived. Michael picked me up and drove me to the Maricopa County Superior Court. Patricia was there with the HOA's lawyer, a slick-looking guy named Richard Watson. The judge, Judge Catherine Morrison, was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who looked like she'd heard every excuse in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said after both lawyers had presented their arguments. "The HOA confiscated backup power equipment that the plaintiff needs to keep his medical devices running, and 3 days later, he ended up in the emergency room because of a power outage." "Your Honor, if I may," Richard Watson said, "the plaintiff had ample opportunity to comply with HOA regulations and chose not to. The HOA cannot be held responsible for his failure to follow proper procedures." "The proper procedures for what? For staying alive?" Judge Morrison looked at Patricia. "Mrs. Thornberry, where is this equipment now?" Patricia stood up. "It's in our maintenance facility, Your Honor. We were planning to use it for a community event." "A community event? So you took someone's medical equipment to heat a picnic?" "We didn't know it was medical equipment." "He never told us. Did you ask?" Patricia hesitated. "Well, no, but he violated the covenants by not getting approval." Judge Morrison looked at me. "Mr. Zander, did you know about the approval requirement?" "No, Your Honor. The equipment is in my backyard, not visible from the street." "I didn't think it required approval, especially since it's medically necessary." "And you have documentation of this medical necessity?" "Yes, Your Honor." Michael handed over the stack of documents we'd prepared. "Medical records, Doctor. Mitchell's letters, the hospital admission records from the power outage incident." Judge Morrison reviewed the documents in silence. The courtroom was quiet except for the rustling of papers. Finally, she looked up. "I'm granting the injunction, Mrs. Thornberry. You and your HOA will return Mr. Zander's equipment to his property by end of business today. You will also reimburse him for all medical expenses incurred as a result of your actions, including the hospital visit and the rental of temporary backup oxygen equipment." "Your Honor, the HOA doesn't have the budget for that," Patricia protested. "Then I suggest you find it. Furthermore, I'm ordering that the HOA amend its covenants to include specific provisions for medical equipment and reasonable accommodations for residents with disabilities. You have 30 days to submit the amendments to this court for approval." Richard Watson stood up. "Your Honor, with all due respect, the court doesn't have the authority to dictate how an HOA writes its covenants. I have the authority to remedy a violation of state and federal disability laws, Counselor, and that's exactly what I'm doing. If the HOA doesn't comply, I'll find you in contempt." She banged her gavel. "This hearing is adjourned." I felt relief wash over me. Finally, someone with authority had listened, but Patricia wasn't done. As we were leaving the courtroom, she walked up to me with venom in her eyes. "You're going to regret this, Oliver. You've made an enemy today." "I didn't make an enemy. You did when you took my medical equipment." "That judge doesn't understand how HOAs work. We have rules for a reason. Without them, the whole community falls apart. Without my oxygen equipment, I fall apart. Permanently." She walked away without another word. That afternoon, the same 2 maintenance workers who'd taken my equipment brought it back. They looked even more uncomfortable than before. "Sorry about all this, man," the younger one said as they reconnected everything. "We didn't know it was for medical stuff." "Did Patricia tell you after she found out?" He and the older worker exchanged glances. "We're not supposed to talk about HOA business with residents." "That's a yes, then." After they left, I tested the whole system. Everything worked perfectly. The propane tank was even still full. They hadn't actually used it for anything yet. They'd just taken it to prove a point. Over the next few days, I started getting notices from the HOA. First, a fine for having my garage door open past 7 in the evening. I'd been unloading groceries. Then a citation for having a weed in my front lawn. I went outside to look. There was a single dandelion, barely an inch tall. Then a notice that my house number needed to be repainted because it was showing signs of fading. I documented all of it and sent it to Michael Chen. "They're retaliating," he said. "This is textbook harassment. Keep every notice, every fine, everything. We're building a case." The harassment got worse. Patricia sent out a community newsletter that didn't mention me by name, but talked about residents who think they are above the rules and the importance of community standards over individual desires. Several neighbors stopped talking to me. One even crossed the street to avoid me. But some people reached out with support. Denise Carlton, the board member who'd seemed sympathetic, called me one evening. "Oliver, I want you to know that I voted against taking your equipment," she said. "Patricia pushed it through over my objections. I'm actually considering resigning from the board." "Don't resign. We need reasonable people on that board." "I don't know if I can make a difference. Patricia controls everything. Sandra and Gregory just do whatever she says." "What about the other residents? Doesn't anyone else see how crazy this is?" "Most people are scared of her. She's been president for 6 years, and she's pushed out anyone who challenged her. The last person who ran against her for president got so many fines and violations that they eventually sold their house and moved." "That's insane." "That's Patricia." 2 weeks after the court hearing, I received a bill from the HOA for $8,000. It itemized the amount as legal fees and court-ordered reimbursements. They were trying to pass the cost of their loss onto me through a special assessment. I called Michael immediately. "They can't do this," he said. "The judge ordered them to pay you, not the other way around, and they can't levy a special assessment against a single homeowner. I'll file a motion for contempt." We were back in court within a week. Judge Morrison was not happy. "Mrs. Thornberry, I ordered your HOA to pay Mr. Zander's expenses. I did not order you to bill him for those expenses." "Your Honor, the HOA's budget comes from homeowner dues. Technically, All homeowners are paying for it. That's not how special assessments work, and you know it. This bill is voided. Furthermore, I'm ordering you to personally attend a seminar on fair housing laws and HOA management. You clearly don't understand the legal responsibilities of your position. Patricia's face turned red. Your Honor, I've been managing this HOA for 6 years. I don't need a seminar. The evidence suggests otherwise. You will complete the seminar within 60 days and provide proof of completion to this court. Is that clear? Yes, Your Honor, Patricia said through gritted teeth. After that hearing, things escalated in a way I didn't expect. I came home from a doctor's appointment to find a notice on my door. The HOA was calling for an emergency special meeting to vote on dissolving the board and electing new leadership. The meeting was scheduled for that Saturday at the community center. I arrived early and was surprised to see the room packed. There had to be over 100 residents there, way more than usual. Patricia called the meeting to order. We're here to address some concerns that have been raised about the current board's leadership. Before we open the floor for discussion, I want to address the rumors that have been circulating. The board has always acted in the best interests of the community. Even when you took someone's medical equipment, a voice called out. I turned to see it was Tom Henderson, the guy whose lawn had gotten him a $500 fine. Patricia's jaw tightened. That situation was resolved through the proper legal channels. After he ended up in the hospital, someone else said. And after you tried to bill him for your mistakes, another voice added. The meeting devolved into chaos. Person after person stood up to share their own stories of Patricia's overreach. The family who got fined for having their trash cans visible 15 minutes past the allowed time. The couple who were cited for having the wrong shade of beige paint on their shutters. The elderly man who received a violation notice for walking too slowly past the clubhouse. Denise stood up. I move that we hold an immediate vote of no confidence in the current board president. You can't do that, Patricia sputtered. That's not on the agenda. According to our bylaws, any board member can call for a vote of no confidence with support from 20% of attending homeowners, Denise said. She'd clearly done her homework. Hands shot up around the room. Way more than 20%. The vote was held. Patricia Thornberry was removed as HOA president by a margin of 87 to 12. Sandra Whitmore and Gregory Hughes resigned on the spot, apparently unwilling to serve without Patricia's protection. Denise was elected as the new president. 2 other residents, including Tom Henderson, were elected to fill the empty board seats. Patricia stood up, her face pale. You're all making a huge mistake. This community needs structure. Without proper enforcement, property values will plummet. Property values might actually go up when people aren't afraid to live in their own homes, Tom said. Patricia grabbed her purse and walked out. As she passed my chair, she leaned down and whispered, "This isn't over." But it was over, at least for her. The new board's first action was to review and revise the community covenants. They eliminated dozens of petty rules and added clear provisions for medical equipment, reasonable accommodations, and a formal appeals process for violations. They also commissioned an audit of the HOA's finances. That's when things got really interesting. The audit revealed that Patricia had been mismanaging funds for years. She'd approved contracts with her brother's landscaping company at inflated prices. She'd used HOA money to renovate the community center offices, which basically only she used. She'd even paid herself a consulting fee of $5,000 a month, despite the HOA bylaws clearly stating that board positions were volunteer only. In total, she'd misappropriated over $200,000 in HOA funds over 6 years. Denise called an emergency board meeting. I attended, along with most of the community. "We've turned these findings over to the Scottsdale Police Department," Denise announced. "They've opened an investigation into embezzlement and fraud." 2 weeks later, Patricia Thornberry was arrested. I watched from my window as police officers walked her out of her house in handcuffs. News vans lined the street. Apparently, HOA president arrested for embezzlement was interesting enough for the local media after all. The legal process took months. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue that the money wasn't embezzlement, but rather legitimate expenses and compensation. The prosecutor disagreed. In the end, Patricia pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA. Her husband divorced her. They had to sell their house to pay legal fees. She lost everything. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The new board reached out to me directly to apologize. Denise came to my house with Tom and the third board member, a retired teacher named Margaret Foster. "Oliver, we want to formally apologize for everything you went through," Denise said. "What happened to you never should have happened. I appreciate that. We've also voted to reimburse you for all your legal fees and to pay for a full upgrade to your backup power system. The HOA will cover the cost of adding battery storage and a more robust generator. We want to make sure you never have to worry about this again." I was stunned. "You don't have to do that." "Yes, we do. You almost died because of Patricia's ego. That's unacceptable. We've also implemented new policies to prevent anything like this from ever happening again. Any medically necessary equipment is automatically approved. We've set up a confidential process for residents to report disabilities or medical conditions that require accommodations. And we've established an independent appeals board for anyone who feels they've been unfairly targeted. Over the next few months, the community transformed. Without Patricia's iron fist, people started actually enjoying living in Meadowbrook Gardens. The pool area became social again. People hosted block parties. The constant fear and tension that had hung over the neighborhood for years just disappeared. My upgraded backup power system was installed by a company specializing in medical-grade home power solutions. I now had enough battery storage to last 3 days without power, plus the propane generator as a secondary backup, plus a solar panel array as a tertiary system. I could probably survive a zombie apocalypse at this point. Dr. Mitchell was thrilled. "This is exactly what I wanted for you all along," she said during a checkup. "Reliable, redundant backup systems. You should never have had to fight for this. At least something good came out of it." More than you know. Your case has actually led to some policy changes at the state level. There's a bill being considered that would explicitly protect medical equipment from HOA interference and require HOAs to have reasonable accommodation policies. They're calling it Oliver's Law. I didn't know what to say to that. A year after the whole ordeal began, I was sitting on my back patio, looking at my backup power system when Denise stopped by. "Hey, Oliver, got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" "The community picnic is coming up. The one Patricia wanted your heater for. We were thinking of dedicating it to you this year, like a thank you for standing up to her and helping expose what was really going on." "That's not necessary." "Maybe not, but we want to do it anyway. You could have just let it go, moved, done anything other than fight. But you fought, and because you did, a lot of people are living better lives now." The picnic was nice. They didn't make a big fuss about the dedication, just a small plaque on the picnic pavilion that read, "In appreciation of Oliver Zander, who reminded us that community means taking care of each other." People came up to me throughout the evening to shake my hand and share their own stories of how life had improved since Patricia left. The Hendersons told me they'd finally been able to paint their front door the color they wanted. An older couple mentioned they could finally park their RV in their driveway without fear of fines. A young family said they felt comfortable letting their kids play outside now without worrying about noise complaints. As the sun set over Scottsdale and the desert air cooled, I sat with my neighbors, breathing easy with my portable oxygen, watching kids run around and families laugh together. My backup power system hummed quietly in my backyard, ready if needed but not dominating my thoughts anymore. Someone asked me if I'd heard about Patricia's appeal being denied. I had. She'd served the full 5 years. You feel bad for her? They asked. I thought about it. I feel bad that she let power corrupt her so completely, but no, I don't feel bad about the consequences. She made her choices. Ellen, my elderly neighbor who'd been too scared to support me during the fight, came over with a plate of cookies. Oliver, I never apologized for not standing with you when you needed support. I was afraid. It's okay, Ellen. No, it's not. I let fear control me. But you've taught me something. Sometimes you have to stand up for what's right, even when it's scary, especially when it's scary. As the evening wore on and people started heading home, I stayed a little longer, enjoying the peace. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael Chen. Saw the news about Patricia's appeal being denied. Justice served. How are you doing? I typed back. Good, really good, and my health was stable. My home was safe. My community was healing. The legal bills were paid off thanks to the HOA's reimbursement and the settlement we'd eventually reached. Dr. Mitchell said my stress levels being lower had actually improved my overall health markers. I thought about how a year ago I'd been terrified and helpless, watching my medical equipment get carted away. How I'd spent that night in the hospital wondering if I'd ever feel safe in my own home again. How close Patricia had come to literally killing me with her petty power trip. But I'd fought back. With help from good people like Michael and Dr. Mitchell and eventually Denise and others in the community, we'd not only solved my problem but made things better for everyone. The propane heater that started everything was still there in my backyard, now part of a sophisticated backup system I'd never have been able to afford on my own. Patricia had wanted to take it for a picnic. Instead, she'd lost everything, and I'd gained a stronger community. As I headed back to my house, I took one last look at the picnic pavilion, all lit up with string lights, families still lingering over dessert and conversation. This was what community was supposed to be. Not rules and fines and fear, but people taking care of each other, looking out for each other, making space for everyone's needs. I went inside, checked my oxygen levels out of habit, and settled into my recliner. The house was quiet except for the steady hum of my concentrator. That sound used to make me anxious, a constant reminder of my limitations. Now it was just background noise, no more concerning than the refrigerator or air conditioning. My phone rang. It was Tom Henderson. Hey, Oliver, quick question. We're forming a committee to help other communities revise their HOA covenants. Would you be willing to share your story at some meetings? Help other people avoid what you went through? Yeah, I said. I can do that. Great. I'll send you the details, and Oliver, thanks again for everything. After we hung up, I thought about Patricia again, sitting in prison, probably still convinced she'd done nothing wrong. Some people never learn. They get a little authority and think it makes them invincible, think the rules they enforce on others don't apply to them. But authority without accountability is just tyranny. Patricia had ruled through fear and intimidation for years, and it had taken someone nearly dying to expose what she really was. I pulled up the news article about her sentencing on my phone. There was her mugshot, her face a mask of anger and defiance. The article mentioned that several other HOA presidents in Arizona had been investigated following her case, and 2 more had been charged with financial misconduct. My story had sparked a wider reckoning. The next morning, I woke up to sunshine streaming through my windows and my oxygen concentrator humming steadily. Just another day, but it felt different somehow. Lighter. I had my health, my home, my independence, my security. All the things Patricia had tried to take from me. I made coffee and sat on my patio, looking out at my backyard. The backup power system stood ready, a testament to survival and perseverance. My phone buzzed with messages from the committee Tom had mentioned, asking for details about my availability. Life went on. The seasons changed. Summer in Arizona was brutal as always, but my power systems held strong through every storm. I attended more HOA meetings, now actually enjoyable instead of confrontational. Denise ran the board with efficiency and fairness. Property values did go up, contrary to Patricia's predictions. I continued my advocacy work, speaking to other communities about the importance of reasonable accommodations and the dangers of unchecked HOA authority. Michael Chen started specializing in HOA law, helping other homeowners fight back against overreach. Dr. Mitchell used my case in presentations about the importance of home-based medical equipment and the need for legal protections. The state bill, Oliver's Law, passed the Arizona legislature 8 months after Patricia's arrest and was signed into law. One afternoon, about 18 months after everything started, I got a letter in the mail. Prison mail. From Patricia. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. The letter was short. No apology, no admission of wrongdoing, just a rambling justification of her actions and a complaint about how unfair her sentence was. She claimed she'd been doing her best for the community, and that people like me had destroyed everything she'd built. She ended with a warning that karma would catch up to me eventually. I read it twice, then threw it away. Some people really never learn. That evening, I attended a community potluck. These had become monthly events, replacing the formal, sterile gatherings Patricia used to mandate. People brought food, kids played, dogs ran around. It was messy and loud and wonderful. Denise came over with a beer for me. "You okay? You seem thoughtful. Got a letter from Patricia today." "Oh, what did it say?" "That she still thinks she was right." Denise shook her head. "Some people can't see past their own ego, but hey, that's her problem now, not ours." "True." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sun set over the desert. "You know what I think about sometimes," Denise said. "What if you hadn't fought back? What if you just accepted it when she took your equipment? I'd probably be dead, or at least in much worse health. And she'd still be president, still stealing from us, still making everyone miserable. One person standing up changed everything." I'd never thought of it quite that way. I hadn't been trying to be a hero or start a revolution. I'd just been trying to survive, to protect the equipment that kept me alive. But Denise was right. My fight had exposed Patricia's corruption, led to reforms not just in our community but across the state, and empowered other people to stand up against similar abuse. The story of my propane heater had become something bigger than me, bigger than Patricia, bigger than Meadowbrook Gardens. It had become a symbol of why oversight and accountability matter, why rules without compassion are just cruelty, why communities need to actually care about their members. As the evening wound down and I headed home, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't had in years. My fight was over. Patricia was in prison. The community was thriving. My health was as good as it could be given my condition. The systems that had failed to protect me had been reformed. I thought about all the people who'd helped me along the way. Michael Chen and his legal expertise, Dr. Mitchell and her advocacy, Denise and her courage to challenge Patricia, Tom and the others who'd shared their stories, even the uncomfortable maintenance workers who'd eventually testified about being ordered to take medical equipment. Justice, when it finally came, hadn't come from one person or one action. It had come from a community of people deciding enough was enough. I settled into bed that night, my oxygen concentrator humming beside me, my backup systems ready if needed, and felt truly safe in my own home for the first time in over a year. The next morning brought new purpose. The committee work kept me busy, traveling around Arizona sharing my story, helping other communities revise their covenants and establish better governance. I became something of an expert on HOA law and medical accommodations, speaking at conferences and consulting with legislators. Michael and I co-wrote an article for a legal journal about the intersection of HOA authority and disability rights. It was cited in several court cases around the country. Dr. Mitchell invited me to speak at a medical conference about patient advocacy and the importance of home-based medical infrastructure. Life had taken an unexpected turn. A year ago, I was just a guy with COP trying to live quietly in his home. Now I was an advocate, an expert, a symbol of resistance against petty tyranny. But I never forgot what it felt like to watch my medical equipment being loaded onto that truck, the fear of sitting in the dark with my oxygen running out, the helplessness of being at someone else's mercy for my survival. Those memories drove me to help others avoid the same fate. Every person I helped, every policy I influenced, every community that reformed because of my story, it all mattered. 3 years after everything began, I was invited to speak at the Arizona State Legislature about HOA reform. The chamber was packed. I saw Michael and Dr. Mitchell in the audience. Denise had driven up from Scottsdale. Even Tom Henderson was there. I told my story once more, but this time to people who could create lasting change across the entire state. I talked about the fear, the fight, the failures of the system, and the reforms that had worked. When I finished, the chamber erupted in applause. Several legislators came up to shake my hand and promise action. More laws were proposed, more protections enacted. On the drive back to Scottsdale, I thought about Patricia again. She was halfway through her sentence by now, scheduled for release in about 2.5 years if she got good behavior credits. I wondered if prison had changed her, if she'd finally understood what she'd done wrong. Probably not. But it didn't matter anymore. She'd been held accountable. The system had worked eventually. Justice had been served. The important thing was that because of everything that had happened, countless other people would be protected. No other HOA could take someone's medical equipment on a whim. No other president could embezzle hundreds of thousands of dollars without oversight. No other community member would have to choose between following arbitrary rules and staying alive. As I pulled into my driveway in Meadowbrook Gardens, I saw my neighbors out walking their dogs, kids riding bikes, people actually living and enjoying their homes without fear. This was what I'd fought for. This was what made it all worthwhile. I went inside, checked my backup power systems out of habit even though they'd never failed, and sat down to answer emails from other homeowners across the country asking for help with their own HOA problems. The fight that had started with a propane heater had become a movement, and I was honored to be part of it. Not because I'd wanted to be, but because sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. And that, in the end, was the real lesson. Patricia had seen the community as something to control, to dominate, to extract value from for herself. But a real community is something you build together, something you protect together, something that protects you in return. My propane heater still sat in my backyard, connected to batteries and generators and solar panels, a fortress of redundancy ensuring I'd never be vulnerable again. But more than that, it was a reminder that sometimes the things we need to survive are worth fighting for, and sometimes fighting for yourself means fighting for something bigger. The sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I sat on my patio, breathing easy, surrounded by the community we'd rebuilt from Patricia's ashes, and felt genuinely grateful to be alive. Not just alive in the literal sense, though my medical equipment certainly helped with that, but alive in the sense of being part of something meaningful, of having made a difference, of having turned a personal crisis into positive change. That's the story of how my HOA seized my propane heater and ended up changing HOA law across Arizona. It's the story of how one woman's petty tyranny was exposed and ended. But most of all, it's the story of how a community found its voice and remembered what community really means. And every time I hear my oxygen concentrator humming or see my backup power system standing ready, I remember that I'm not just staying alive. I'm living proof that standing up to injustice matters, that fighting for what's right makes a difference, and that even the smallest act of resistance can spark real change.